Hi, I'm Shutong from MSc Applied Linguistics in the University of Edinburgh. In this presentation, I will talk about my research proposal that investigates the extent of Coda nasal place neutralization in Cantonese Mandarin, its outcome, and also the vowel contexts which encourage it. In modern Chinese varieties, mergers or positional neutralizations of alveolar nasal and velar nasal are frequently observed. Place contrasts in nasal consonants are more difficult to distinguish than in oral stops in both onset and coda position, and are subject to positional neutralization more frequently than similar oral segments. And currently, interference from an L1 that doesn't have relevant place contrast is the most commonly proposed cause. Some researchers argue that the biomechanical properties of specific preceding vowels are also the reason behind this. For example, unrounded front-closed vowel make its contest especially easy to place neutralization. Palatal segments have a relatively high co-articulatory resistance, facilitating them imposing their articulatory demands on those segments. Low vowels such as unrounded, open front vowel have a lower co-articulatory resistance and are freer to vary contextually to accommodate adjacency segments' articulatory requirements. In Chinese languages, syllable codas are generally restricted to a small set of segments, including the voiced bilabial nasals, alveolar nasals, and velar nasals. Most varieties have lost coda bilabial nasal. Many varieties, such as Standard Mandarin, or still distinguish alveolar nasal and velar nasal. Previous research on Standard Mandarin suggests that there is phylum lowering and nasalization of the low vowels. On regional Mandarins, they mainly investigate Taiwan Mandarin and Shanghai Mandarin. Taiwan Mandarin is a regional variety of Standard Mandarin. A major distinction between Taiwan Mandarin and Standard Mandarin is speakers of Taiwan Mandarin typically merge nasal codas after E, merge variably after but never after A. Taiwan Mandarin speakers often also speak Taiwanese Minnan, a variety not mutually intelligible with Standard Mandarin. Some of the specifics of the neutralization patterns in Taiwan Mandarin have been attributed to interference from Taiwanese Minnan. It's obvious that Southern Taiwanese Minnan people doesn't allow yin but allowed in their speech. So, correspondingly, Southern Taiwanese Mandarin speakers are observed of having a nasal neutralization of alveolar nasal after E. Shanghainese is the local dialect for residents of the Shanghai area. Local people learn to speak Mandarin as a second language at school. In Shanghainese, there is no phonological contrast between voiced alveolar nasal and voiced velar nasal, and these two sounds are changed into voiced palatal nasal in spoken language. Correspondingly, in Shanghai Mandarin, alveolar nasal and velar nasal are merged into palatal nasal after E, which correspond to the changes of Shanghainese. This leads us to state a hypothesis that first language results in the incompetent acquisition of discriminating sound contrasts of coda nasals in Shanghai Mandarin. However, in other preceding vowels, there is no similar pattern. So, some other researchers argue that the preceding vowel E causes the change. They argue that the front high vowel E has a high co-articulatory resistance, restricting nasal codas, and it causes the palatalization of the following sounds in Shanghai Mandarin. Here, it comes to Cantonese and Cantonese Mandarin. Different from Shanghainese and Taiwanese, Cantonese distinguishes alveolar nasal, velar nasal, and also bilabial nasal. However, in production, Cantonese Mandarin speakers frequently merge nasal codas. This change disproves the previous hypothesis that first language interference is the main reason for nasal neutralization. Previous research on Cantonese Mandarin is comparatively inadequate than on other varieties, but this speech community is of a population of 104 million people, so I would like to conduct research addressing this specific speech community. So my research questions are, first, how native Cantonese people pronounce avillanasal and villanasal in their Cantonese Mandarin. And second, if they neutralize these two sounds, what factors influence their neutralization? This study will adopt an opportunity sampling method and select 20 participants among Chinese university students, 10 self-identified bilingual speakers of Cantonese and Cantonese Mandarin, and 10 standard Mandarin speakers. For Cantonese speakers, they are required to be proficient in Cantonese before 7 years old, and for standard Mandarin speakers, they will be sampled from students with no command of Cantonese. They will respectively be divided into experiment group and comparison group. This sampling method is determined to choose a set of participants representing the general status of Cantonese Mandarin speakers and standard Mandarin speakers. In the first part of the experiment, I will provide a set of phrases that contain avillanasal and villanasal and ask participants to tell a story using these phrases. This task is for eliciting the nasal's pronunciation in casual utterances and get data as naturally as possible. In the second part of this experiment, participants will be given an extract of a Chinese traditional poem, Water Song. It is important to note that this poem is a well-known piece of literature in China, and also it is selected in the textbook of grade 7. As all Chinese students are required to take 9-year compulsory education, they are supposed to have learned them before and have a detailed understanding of what the content and contexts are. As the result, I will anticipate participants showing a higher distinction of villanasal and avillanasal in reading this poem, both for standard Mandarin speakers and Cantonese Mandarin speakers. Specifically choosing this passage is for testing participants' nasal articulatory across genres and formal and informal settings. The third section is reading phrases. In this section, participants will be required to read 15 pairs of phrases. In every pair, only the last phoneme will be different, respectively avillanasal and villanasal. All target words will appear at the end of each phrase. Here it comes to the measures and analytical methods in methodology. Each instance of nasals in the 3 tasks will be recorded and also their preceding vowels. And I will follow the previous researchers' methods by using ultrasound tongue imaging to examine nasal Coda neutralization in production from Cantonese Mandarin speakers and standard Mandarin control speakers. These models maximize statistical power despite an unequal number of observations under each condition. They also allow us to evaluate the contribution of the independent variables while controlling for baseline differences across speakers and items using the highest random effects structure with intercepts and slopes that converge. Here comes to the possible outcomes and discussions. Based on previous research on Shanghai Mandarin and Taiwan Mandarin, a hypothesis is that Cantonese Mandarin speakers will have an overall higher rate of nasal merging than standard Mandarin speakers. Specifically, in different tasks, a genre-related differences in nasal coda is expected. I anticipate a higher rate of nasal merging in storytelling tasks, followed by reading poems and reading passages in experiment group. When telling a story, Cantonese Mandarin speakers will be more aware of their content and coherence than their word pronunciation. But when reading the poem as more formal and more restricted, participants will have a higher percentage of producing standard pronunciation. Then we can draw a conclusion that nasal neutralization can be relevant to the formal or informal text genres. Another hypothesis is that participants may exhibit similar nasal merging behavior across different genres and also across different formal and informal settings. If they show these phenomena, I would just anticipate and deduct that context didn't doesn't influence nasal merging phenomenon. I also anticipate a different degree of distinguishing nasal codas after different preceding vowels. As shown in previous literature, standard Mandarin speakers show a different degree of difficulty in distinguishing these three sets of nasal codas. So I believe Cantonese speakers will behave the same. So if that is the case, I will have really strong evidence showing that preceding vowels are influential factors affecting people's nasal neutralizations. Based on the design of this research, we can assume that people are more comfortable and casual when using neutralized nasal coda in speech, since they are doing that more in informal settings. The underlying reason urges us to consider sociolinguistic understanding. People's choice of neutralized sound may be an identity construction act. To some extent, nasal mergers index an identity of Southern Chinese people, or more directly to Cantonese people. Cantonese Mandarin speakers want to use this variable to address their identity as Cantonese and distinguish themselves from people from other parts of China who use standard Mandarin, like the Northerners. The contributions of this research can be first filling the blank of investigation on Cantonese Mandarin speakers, and second, providing genre-related analysis in these phenomenon. Third, regional indexicality insight on this specific phenomenon. Thank you for your patience. This is the end of my research proposal presentation. Thank you.